Greetings guys and welcome to a Dragon Ball Super discussion. Yeah, I know I've not been posting videos for over a month, but the thing is, May is a bitchy month. It's a time when my allergy explodes and my voice gets crappier than usual. Due to this, I didn't find a way to record. Sorry if it takes me a nice age to make a new video, but I hope you'll enjoy this one. Today's video is pretty different from those I uploaded so far, since I want to talk about Dragon Ball Super episodes, not only animation wise, but also about some other components, like its content, direction and storyboard. If you follow me on Twitter, you may know I started off a Dragon Ball Super rewatch in which I analyze every episode from every single arc. So how about listing my personal best and worst episodes of every single Dragon Ball Super arc, also explaining why I choose some episodes in particular. Considering I never talked about Dragon Ball Super as a series in a video, why not? Without further ado, let's start off with the Battle of Gods Ark, which retells the facts from the 2013 movie. I do believe the best episode of this arc is 11, which is possibly the most balanced of this arc. It's got a quite solid staff list, not the ideal staff list, but still. King Ryu is the writer whose characterizations were usually on point and knew how to create cool moments, like when Goku re-emerges after getting a fighting boner near the end. It's storyboarded by my favorite animator Naoto Shishida, whose output isn't brilliant but still provides some great storyboarding. He makes use of the same visual picks most of the time, like comic book-like smoke lifting on the background or gaping mouth close-ups, but there is a right way and a wrong way to make a board. As long as he's that compelling, I really don't mind him being formulaic. Takao Iwai takes on the directional department and his output is quite solid too. Iwai is a fairly consistent director but rarely excels in that regard. At the very least, his music placement is mostly correct. And lastly, Naoki Tate is a supervisor who doesn't deliver his absolute best material though. He kinda played it safe here, which I can understand due to episode 5 Aftermath. Nonetheless, I definitely appreciate this balanced staff, who could render this episode balanced as well. I guess balance doesn't seem to be that common in these early arcs, and I know some people prefer episode 13 because of its art consistency or 14 for Ryo Onishi's sequence, but in the end I decided to pick 11 for this very reason. Despite not being a fan of current Yamamuro, I have to admit his supervision in 13 is strong and consistent. Art-wise, it's indeed above average from Battle of Gods standards. However, his storyboarding is in line with his Resurrection of F output, which is sadly pretty boring, with stock poses and stock perspectives. Masanori Sato's direction is also really weak, and even though the universe risks to disappear, nearly no tension is felt. Not to mention Sumitomo's turning the tables during Takahashi and Inaba's cuts is completely out of context despite not being a bad track. As for 14, its direction is a lot better and improves the scale of the main fight, but like I said copious times, I'm no fan of the Tsushima-Nabe combo since their styles are opposite and the second half feels much weaker than the first one. In any case, Onishi's sequence is by miles the best animated scene of the Battle of Gods Ark, but I still consider episode 11 the most balanced. As for the worst episodes, some of you might be surprised, but I actually don't consider episode 5 the worst of this arc. While I think it could have been executed much better than this, with better direction and storyboard, and the first half looks poor, I also quite enjoyed the second half, with Otsuka and Tate providing key animation. Either way, Toei's messed up production is plain to all, and we could easily do without episode 5 to occur, but it isn't the worst thing ever. In reality, I consider episode 3 far worse than the fifth one, not because of its visuals since it's supervised and solo animated by Yoshitaka Yashima, who has the speed of the gods, but because of its content. When it comes to Dragon Ball, I'm usually lenient, as I tend to forgive its plot holes and inconsistencies. I mean, every show has issues. But what I cannot positively forgive is boredom, and this episode is slow and boring. I get it for the sake of exposition, but I just find it boring. Besides, this is also Yoshitaka Tosho's first episode as a writer, and he's generally a good writer, but I'm simply annoyed by how a few characters are portrayed. God damn it, Kaio-sama is such a douchebag. We get it, you're dead because of Goku. Stop saying that all the time, you're annoying. Bulma is also a shit. By now she should be aware of science needing to train in order to save the nepotistic place where she lives. Sorry if they bust their asses to defend the planet where you live with your nepotism. Don't get me wrong, she was a pain in the ass in the Namek arc too, but when I want to watch a Dragon Ball episode, I demand entertainment, not annoyance. Another episode that seems to get a lot of hate is 12, the infamous screaming contest between Goku and Beerus. Yeah, I pretty much agree, it's pretty bad. We get plenty of Shimanuki's potato heads and the two Kaioshins being idiots who keep saying Owarida as though they were Jiren's parents. Masato Mikami's direction is also pretty lackluster, whereas Toshiaki Komura's board has some nice glimpses but lacks of consistency, which is pretty common for him. He's got some nice ideas but doesn't always put them into practice. Same goes with episode 9, in which his board shows some interesting chromatic contrast between Goku's red aura and the yellow clouds, albeit inconsistent. Tosho's characterizations are also debatable, especially on Vegeta acting like a douchebag all the time. He just goes, wah, I wanna be a Super Saiyan God. What do annoying characters do? They annoy the audience, simple as that. Now then, Resurrection of F. Given that it's one of the worst arcs alongside the Black Star Dragon Ball arc, it's really difficult for me to find more than one honorable mention, because I find this arc really dull, much like the movie. The best, or better saying the least bad episodes are actually the slice of life fillers from 15 to 18. In fact, this is the only time I wanted to see fillers more than the actual plot. Anyway, you probably guessed which episode is my favorite from this arc. Of course, it's 18, which is quite a fan favorite. Oddly enough, this episode has the same staff as 11, minus the writer Yukinori Fukushima, who is known for being Super's weakest writer. And even so, I have to give him credit for what is maybe his best episode as a writer. It's pretty well paced, Iwai's direction is solid, Shida doesn't provide his best looking board, but Nagisa Nishida's art direction is quite competent. As for Tate, he's such a perfect choice to handle comedy, as he knows how to deal with different expressions. Once again, Suji's corrections fit like a glove for Tate's chubby hands. Their traits overwhelm everything else, including Atsushi Nikaido's cut, which was pretty hard to trace. That's it, I don't have honorable mentions for this arc. I guess episode 27 is a decent finale, Hiroyuki Kakuto's board is pretty nice, but still remains a rushed looking episode. It's not enough for me to consider it a honorable mention. On the other hand, there are so many episodes I can choose as the worst one. My final pick is way too predictable, but no surprise, I loathe episode 24. Not only it's the worst Resurrection of F episode, but also the worst of Dragon Ball Super and even one of the worst episodes ever released, on a par with episode 89 of Dragon Ball Z and episode 7 of GT, which are mere abominations. I get it's a rushed episode. It even has two storyboard artists, Komura and Imamura, whose boards start off pretty well but fall flat eventually. What does bug me is Imamura's inconsistency. He was a regular in the original series, he even directed Kid Buu's death. He's got some qualities, but his output is really varying. Hideki Hiroshima is also a pretty mediocre director, he never stood out that much. The fight between Goku and Freezer is dreadful, and even if we pretend it wasn't animated or supervised by Kitano, it would still be bad, because the concept of the fight is basically non-existent. It's just Freezer aiming at Goku's eyes over and over. I'm no fan of the movie, but at least it had a fantastic cut from Kodai Watanabe, who is currently a Precure regular, and goddammit, he's such an animal. Moreover, I wished Tosho had never included the bit with Vegeta interrupting the fight. It was annoying in the movie, and it's even more annoying in this episode. I mean, we're no longer in the Cell arc, and Vegeta is still a douchebag. So much for character development. While we're at it, let's also address how the Super Saiyan Blue introduction is also really weak. Sumitomo's Blue Saiyan fits the scene, but Tsuchi's corrections extended Goku's face, probably to mask a previous correction by Kitano, thus she gives far less depth to his expression during his transformation. Especially if the following scene shows all the problems I addressed about this awful episode. Someone also appears to dislike episode 22 because of the Ginyu plot hole, which is founded since I dislike it as well. Ginyu has been a stupid character ever since the Namek arc. He's probably the dumbest fighter ever, as he doesn't seem to know the side effect of his own damn technique. And for some reason he gets used to Tagoma's powers immediately. I don't like making this sort of conclusion, but yes, it's indeed bad writing. Regardless, this is not even the main reason why I dislike episode 22. I hate it because it's boring. It's really serious when you don't care for a story. Entertainment is the basis. If you're not into a plot, it feels rather pointless. Yashima's output is alright, but everything is overshadowed by how tedious this episode appears. Universe 6 arc is middle of the road, but after rewatching it, I was quite impressed by how consistent the storyboarding was during the tournament. Although it's not that memorable animation-wise, and only one or maybe two episodes stand out in that regard. I think the best Universe 6 episode is 38, since it feels the most complete of this arc. Well boarded and directed by Kohei Atano, and also well animated thanks to specialists like Tate, Inaba, Nikaido, Tuyonse and even Wonpac, who were a pretty underrated studio. Their halves were pretty animated and dynamic. It isn't perfect though, since I'm not a fan of Tate's Vegeta vs Hit because of his blur, which is a bit distracting. I actually find this Goku vs Hit cut a lot better, as it takes advantage of Atano's board and his movements are far more complex and looser, also adding some welcome character acting on Goku. To a certain extent, episode 37 can be considered a gem, well directed by Y and very well boarded by Yukio Kaizawa. Vegeta's evil actions are justified, since he wants Kaba to become a Super Saiyan. Makes sense considering Kaba is basically the opposite of the likes of Nappa, Raditz or even Caulifla. He's more bashful and insecure and not as boring. Visual-wise, it's one of the first episodes to start the trend of second halves being better than the first. Especially with the likes of Yuichi Karasawa, the king of shading, whose second half is a clear improvement over the first one, which looked quite stiff. And that's it, I don't recall further Universe 6 episodes that can be considered gems. Huh? What's that? Oh yeah, episode 39. An absolute fan favorite mostly because of the Kaioken comeback. On one hand, I can see why people like it, but I'm not gonna lie, I expected more. Hear me out, I don't find it bad. I actually enjoy King Ryu's characterization. Goku is himself, Vegeta is himself, Beerus is himself, and so on. However, I wish it was better executed. Ryota Nakamura's board is really good, but I know he's better than this. He's a great professional, and it's pretty obvious I have high expectations on him. Besides, believe it or not, I have more issues with Manabe's stuff rather than Kitano's stuff. Maybe because of my initial expectations once again. I'm not saying it's bad. It's just really weird to see Manabe's corrections being overwhelmed by another artist's correction, like Yoichi Onishi. He doesn't even provide key animation during his own half. He sure does correct the final scene alongside Ida and Yamamuro, but I expected something more from a top supervisor like him. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed this episode, but not as much as my personal honorable mentions. As for the worst, the most obvious answer might be episode 30, since it's a clip show, a poorly directed clip show. I guess the only redeeming aspects are Vegeta suggesting Gohan's name to enter the tournament and Shimanuki's light return to form in the second half. His Mickey Mouse-like hands look cute, and he still knows how to draw Piccolo, but he doesn't manage to nail frontal views, since he usually falls for potato-like visages. This aside, it's a pretty pointless episode content-wise. I get it for making its production breathe, but let's put ourselves in the fans' shoes in 2016, when we used to wait every week for a new episode and we got a clip show. It's a pretty common thought. Episode 33 receives plenty of criticism due to Goku vs Botamo being a pretty poor fight. Yes, I pretty much agree. Botamo is like King Midas, every fight becomes shit when he's around. Yashima's board is quite nice, but as a whole, I find this episode mediocre at most. I also see why someone is disappointed by it, since the last tournament we had was the 28th, after the Gods Ark timeskip, and watching such a mediocre beginning is pretty much deceiving. Another honorable mention is 31, which is mediocre as well, but I need to clarify one thing. Bulma, like Chi-Chi, is not almighty. She's a human, A-N-I-N-G-E-N. This running gag of her being fearsome must stop, once and for all. Why? Because it's senseless and so damn repetitive, especially if you belong to a fighting race, can control God Ki, and nonetheless you still fear a spoiled and historical nepotist. This is fucking status quo, like SpongeBob never obtaining his driving license. I know it's supposed to be a politically correct gag, more like an unfunny gag, that is. Moving on, Future Trunks arc marks an important change of pace for Super, as not only does alter the tone of the series, but also represents a progressive improvement production-wise. Albeit not complete, but still considerable, compared with the previous 46 episodes. The two villains, Black and Zamasu, are awesome. Black is my second favorite villain after Freezer of course, while Zamasu is a character you like to dislike. He's got an unlikable attitude and is basically a racist, but that's his personality. He's a dick on purpose because he's a villain. With this sort of premises, there are so many episodes I can choose as the best one of this arc. Therefore, before revealing my number 1, I wanted to address some honorable mentions. 57 manages to make Black and Zamasu's threat significant, as both Goku and Trunks are no match against them. Zamasu may not be that powerful, but is immortal, so any move against him is completely pointless. Nakamura delivers a really strong storyboard and direction, as this is the first instance we can find the best aspect of his boards, silhouettes being placed in wide shots. This technique is just wonderful, as it gives more depth to the show by also making it look more up to date. We saw a similar thing in Morio Hatano's board in episode 6, but with characters looking defined and not as silhouettes. It's not an easy task, as both Goku and Trunks fight back, and without a strong direction, it takes the risk of having a patchy episode. Thankfully, this doesn't occur. The fight is really enjoyable, especially if you get a certain guy to animate 25 seconds. Godly 25 seconds. Episode 65 is also a remarkable mention. It's maybe the best directed episode of this arc, even better than my number 1, and once again Nakamura is here. I really like how Merge Zamasu feels huge compared to everyone else, from the top downwards. Sumitomo's score is well placed, and his Dragon Ball Kai compositions are used on Super for the first time permanently. Animation wise, most of the action is taken on by Tate and partially by Higashida as well, but the art difference between Tate and the fellow supervisor Osamu Ishikawa can get a bit jarring, since they share opposite approaches. Ishikawa is quite in line with model sheets, whereas Tate indulges in more freedom. So if some of you isn't a big Tate fan, you'll view it as an issue. Now then, on to my real number 1. Perhaps you saw that coming, but my favorite Future Trunks arc episode is 66. Kinda predictable pick, but this is the first time the series gets an all-star episode despite its production issues. Inaba, Higashide, Karazawa, Shimanuki, Shida, Myuma, Manabe and Otsuka give a satisfying climax to this arc. I know it's not technically the last episode, but still. If 65 was better directed, 66 has more animation talent. Morio Hatano's output is very good, but I'd lie if I said this was his best work on the series. In fact, I do think episodes 6 and 14 were better directed, despite not being nearly as great as this one. It's not a mind-blowing episode, since some scenes are competently executed, yet really traditional, like Shimanuki's cut or Otsuka's final segment, which does look pretty neat and clean, but the movements are kinda average and shallow. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but does make us realize the animation staff of episode 66 stood out quantity-wise and not completely quality-wise. And most of all, it does make us realize the series production has not been healed yet, which does explain why everything fell apart in episode 67. Again, it's my favorite episode of this arc. I didn't say it's bad, I just wanted this to become a starting point and not an arrival point. This arc isn't flawless though, as I also find some episodes to be either lacking or just plain bad. Given that the series' visual quality is a gradual improvement over the past arcs, it's still not exempt from really problematic situations, like episode 62, whose first half is simply disastrous. In hindsight, it may not be the worst episode since Masanori Sato's board is quite nice and Koshi Nishizawa's second half is mostly inoffensive, but I still blame it for several reasons. For instance, they never explain how Trunks achieved Super Saiyan Rage. Say what you want about Ultra Instinct, but at least it came full circle. Whis introduced it way back in episode 18 and Goku had time to undergo this state, defensive and then offensive. Another problem I have is missing points. After Vegeta and the others go back to their timeline, they give more screen time to characters that aren't even involved in this arc. Goten, Trunks and Chi-Chi. I didn't mention Pilaf since he was told to heal Goku. Goten and Trunks play hide and seek, Chi-Chi keeps yelling Goku-san! Goten-chan! And so on. This gets really distracting to the point that it misses the whole point. Besides, they forgot the concept of appreciation. Apparently, Bulma does trust his friend more than her husband. I understand she's known Goku for more years than Vegeta, but Goku is not her husband. She isn't supposed to bash Vegeta like that, especially if she was busy hiding her nepotistic butt while the Saiyans were receiving a beating. I know Vegeta is a shrimp-like trend as a character, but he deserves far more respect. Episode 58 also has a few things I dislike, like a mediocre direction from Hiroshima and a contest about which character I hate more, between Goku being an idiot and Bulma being a bitch. Then again, I don't have enough points to criticize this one, since Kaizawa's board is great and Yashima is a guarantee. I actually feel sorry for Kaizawa, he's such a talented artist. I believe he isn't given sufficient value. Especially if you storyboard an awful entry like episode 53. Now that's the worst Future Trunks episode in my opinion. Visual-wise, it doesn't look too bad. Ishikawa's supervision is fine, the small fight between Goku and Zamasu is slow-paced, could be better but I guess it's okay. And Kaizawa's board is great. Then, what is the real problem? Goku's characterization. It's just atrocious. He reminds me of SpongeBob from season 6, you know, the season that gave us some masterpieces like Boating Buddies and Professor Squidward. Here Goku is just like him. I'm honestly astounded it's a Tosho episode. He's a good writer, he's a fan favorite. Why did he drop the ball here? If Goku acted stupidly for a minute, I'd forget about it. But the point is, he acts stupidly from the beginning to the very end. It's just so distracting. I don't even have time to admire Kaizawa's board, because Goku is just so asinine. For those who say Future Trunks arc displays a pretty bad characterization for Goku, yes, I pretty much agree. Lastly, Universe Survival Arc. Several fans criticized this arc for not possessing an actual story, since it's already the second tournament-centered arc of the series. On one hand, it's true, since if an episode isn't particularly well animated or directed, the lack of a story stands out quite easily. However, I'm indeed willing to accept another tournament arc as long as it's entertaining, well executed and is not boring. I'm also willing to accept its episodic build-up, despite being a battle royale, because I want to see new characters, I want to see new fights, I want to witness great moments. Sure enough, this arc has several pros, such as giving value to different characters like Gohan, 17 and Freezer, and also showing how the series further improved in terms of visuals. Series director Nakamura explained how improving the overall visual quality was already in their plans before the arc began, and how he gave his all to keep high standards, even by correcting other people's storyboards. Especially considering how the series started off, it was unexpected to see the best animated arc of the franchise belonging to such a controversial series like Dragon Ball Super. As usual, before revealing my number 1 of this arc, let's take on some honorable mentions. Episode 86 is a great entry that offers a downright brilliant fight between Goku and 17. Tate is simply a Martian. His movements look so stylish, so fluid and arrogant to an extent. The choreography is just so strong, and even if looped animation looks a bit awkward, it's sort of hidden by Kiyosato Yamamoto's board, which looks absolutely brilliant. I guess I also need to mention episode 95, which I particularly appreciate for 3 reasons: the return of Freezer, Tatsuya Nagamine's direction, and Naoto Shishida's output. Super 17 arc turned Freezer into a joke by getting frozen like a sucker, no pun intended, while Resurrection of F tried to restore his lifeblood by giving him a new form. I believe Freezer regained his cred in this very arc. He's the best Dragon Ball villain and does show it right here. He's well-mannered yet ruthless. He's really smug yet polite. He's ready to cooperate with his nemesis, but at the same time he's ready to sabotage. Shida's board is wonderful, also enhanced by Akio Yamaguchi and Tatsuya Nagamine's directional output. The latter is the series director alongside Nakamura, and as you know, he's going to storyboard the upcoming movie. The way he handles lights, shades and colors is flawless. His contribution makes Dragon Ball not only much deeper, but also look it like a more up-to-date anime. Shida's key animation is really limited and is maybe his weakest on Super, but you know what? Even his weak cuts are strong. That's the best aspect of this exceptional animator. His art is a godsend, and I adore how his shut eyes resemble those from Uchiyama and Ohara at Last House. Such a lovely reference. As for the tournament itself, there are many great entries, but I can only pick a few of them, such as the TV special aired last October. 109 and 110 are packed with great animators and are also incredibly well directed by Kazuya Karazawa and Masato Mitsuka respectively. 110 used to be my favorite episode until number 1 aired, and I basically friend-zoned it. Sorry. Either way, it's the 3rd best directed episode of the series, as Mitsuka's output is stellar. Beerus' tension is so palpable, and the introduction of Ultra Instinct looks just huge. From Sumitomo's Blue Cyan to Goku's silhouette popping up in a white background, simply awesome. Animation-wise, 110 is the opposite of 66, since it actually stands out more quality-wise and not that much quantity-wise. Tate is such an ideal pick to animate Ultra Instinct, while Yuya Takahashi displays some of the best looking artwork ever seen on Dragon Ball. I also like that the Ultra Instinct shown here is incomplete, as Goku can predict Jiren's moves, but in return his own attacks can't hurt him. This distinction is really important for the following episodes, like 116, really well boarded by Makoto Sonoda, which features the end of the fight between Goku and Kefla, with a point-blank Kamehameha as the big climax. Kenta Yokoya's beam effect looks so idiosyncratic, I totally dig it. One last mention, which happens to be the real last episode 131, the best directed, which also shows how the time schedule isn't as lacking as the recent past, albeit not excellent. Yamamura's supervision is really on point, Takahashi provides his best work on the series, and Megumi Shitani's board is perfect. She's only 27 and has a really bright future ahead of herself. Goku and Freezer's teamwork is so precious, and nobody would ever expect 17 to have such an active role on this arc. Really satisfying finale. Nonetheless, my number 1 of this arc is 130, which I consider one of the best episodes ever made. Watching it live was an unforgettable experience. We were afraid of having a poor climax with lots of reused animation and maybe lacking direction. Thankfully, we were so wrong. It's the 2nd best directed episode, and Nakamura's leitmotif almost reaches perfection. The main focus is on the fight between Goku and Jiren, and we are never distracted by cutaways. The animation staff is nearly ideal, with the top key animators giving their best outputs. Tate and Manabe are two of the strongest supervisors, and the latter's corrections are so versatile. I do hope this episode will be the starting point of a brand new series. However, this arc isn't always a bed of rosés, because it has some flaws too. This tournament drags out way too long, with some episodes not needing to exist, as they take on specific concepts which are reused in future entries. Another issue I have is spotlighting who doesn't deserve spotlighting. No, I'm not talking about Ribrianne, she's fine. I'm actually referring to Kale and episode 100. Visual-wise, it's fairly decent. Karazawa's direction is solid, Nikaido's cut is pretty strong, and Yashima is Yashima. Its content, though, bothers me. First of all, shall we remember that 18 insulted Krillin for lowering his guard last episode? She really got some nerve to insult him, as she apparently forgot he saved her robotic butt from getting eliminated. And can you remind me the reason? Because she lowered her fucking guard. God damn it, I hate their hypocrisy. Then we get to the main event. Kale is insecure, whines all the time, gets a beating from some Universe 10 fighters, and nothing happens. Whereas Goku just tells her to go away and she is triggered. Thus she becomes Broline, a stupid reference to a stupid character. Her screaming is obnoxious. Her repeating Goku's name all the time is even more obnoxious. Her withstanding Super Saiyan Blue Goku's Kamehameha is so dumb. Her personality loss is such a problem. At least Caulifla is uncouth, worrying and very cocky, but her character feels closer to Universe 7 science rather than Universe 6 science. On the other hand, Kale is locked up by a bad reference. She's not as inane as Maron, but please, no more Broline. Overall, this arc tried to keep certain standards in order to avoid the quality decreases of the previous arcs, even by reusing animation, which can be fine as long as it's not that distracting. Episode 124 isn't that troublesome content-wise. In fact, Gohan teaming up with Freezer is a nice idea. Sadly, it's overshadowed by the excessive amount of reused animation. During that moment, it was indeed worrisome, since we thought the production was collapsing again. I remember being quite pissed off because I felt so underwhelmed. On second thought, it might not be as bad as I found it the first time. Yoichi Onishi's Freezer looks pretty cool, Manabe's aggressive corrections are really versatile, once again, and Yamamoto's board is pretty nice. But Hiroshima's poor direction and the great deal for reused animation are not to be overlooked. Without good animation and/or direction, several Dragon Ball arcs seem to struggle, either for not having a true story or for being badly paced. The Namek arc had this exact problem, since the really poor fighting pacing, the constant padding and tedious fillers made this arc mediocre as a whole, despite having a fantastic villain like Freezer. This arc has no actual story and thus rely on pure talents, who made it look great, but when they're absent, this flaw stands out immediately. As a result, I am revealing my least favorite episode of this arc, that is 119. Badly written, badly directed and really dull content-wise. It hurts me to see Myuma and Nikaido here. They are amazing animators, but they feel kinda waste, to be honest. A lot of fans compared this episode to a video game, as if it was played into different levels. You know why? Because the director's task is to maintain a cohesion between scenes of a film. Komura doesn't manage to do it, as he possibly provides his worst output on the series. His direction is really lackluster, as it's a cutscene after cutscene after cutscene. There is no point of convergence. In terms of animation, the execution also leaves to be desired, especially during Namatame's second half, and it fails to be somewhat engaging and entertaining. Say what you want about 113, but it was fun to watch, albeit poorly directed. This episode is quite boring in reality. Nonetheless, the main reason why I dislike this episode is that it fails at everything. It's like 118 never existed in the first place. Where is Beerus' torment after Champa's erasure? Where is the respect for Piccolo? Where is the respect for Catopesla? The way they are eliminated is pure bullshit. I know I said the episodic build-up didn't bother me that much, but again, there is a right way and a wrong way to make things. And goddammit, it's so wrong here. Even the erasure of Universe 4 feels weightless. No sad track, no last goodbye, it just happens. Then again, Kitela is a turd, so I guess he didn't deserve a better treatment. Fair enough. So these are my best and worst picks of Dragon Ball Super. Again, sorry if I sounded quite salty at some points. I never talked about Super on a video, so I hope I didn't bore you enough. Leave your own best worst episodes down in the comment section after watching the whole video. Thank you very much for joining me on this ride and see you next time. Che che che, motherfucker!